Listen to Star Wars.
Hey y'all, if you don't know us, I'm Matt.
And I'm Max.
We're a couple of Star Wars nerds who are also paleontologists. And since this May 4th, we're coming up on the first Star Wars theatrical release in 7 years.
Jesus.
We've decided to talk about an animal prominently featured in The Mandalorian to celebrate the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu later this month.
If you've seen The Mandalorian, you'll be familiar with this sort of dinosaur-looking animal called a blurrg.
Dang, they really ran out of decent names for things fast, huh?
Yeah.
But blurrg don't originate in The Mandalorian. Real ones will recognize the blurrg from the Ryloth arc in Season 1 of Clone Wars, but even realer ones will recognize blurrg from their original debut in the 1985 television movie Ewoks: The Battle for Endor, which was a sequel to an earlier television movie called Ewoks: Caravan of Courage.
You might be familiar with the scary Ewok meme that came out of that movie.
I have no idea where these non-canon TV movies fit in the timeline or whether they connect to the Ewoks cartoon, but I do know that Ewoks were a weirdly prominent group of characters during the mid-80s.
If there's one thing old GL loves, it's that good toy money.
Blurrg have often been compared to Tyrannosaurus rex because of the fact that they stand on two legs, have tiny two-fingered hands, and have a big head with sharp teeth. They've also been compared to Spinosaurus in several memes. Our friend and fellow science communicator Dino Guy already covered why this isn't how Spinosaurus sales work, so go check out his video when you're done here.
This of course got us, two paleontologists, interested in one question. Just what kind of dinosaur is a blurrg?
And yes, we know blurrg aren't real. This is a hypothetical just for fun. Seriously, just for fun.
So to celebrate Star Wars Day this year, we'll pursue this hypothetical question of Star Wars science. Where would blurrg fit on the dinosaur family tree?
You might assume the answer was obvious, that they look like a kind of T-Rex, so they're probably most closely related to T-Rex.
And while that assumption seems logical, we need to dig deeper to sleuth this out because there are a few traits on a blurrg that may suggest otherwise.
Let's start with the feet. Not like that.
The feet of blurrg don't seem structured the same way as most large theropod feet, which tend to sort of look like big bird feet. They're a little more stumpy, with shorter and more rounded toes.
That's true, and on top of that, the metatarsals seem very short. It's almost plantigrade. Also, as a mammal paleontologist, I can't help but look at teeth. Those teeth may be sharp, but they don't necessarily imply carnivore. They're very peg-like, which usually implies one of two things: fish eaters and branch strippers.
Strippers.
Not like that. For instance, the plant-eating sauropods have large peg-like teeth for stripping leaves from plants and branches.
This is actually confirmed both in canon and legends. Blurrg are generally considered herbivorous animals, but not obligate herbivores. According to Wikipedia, they will opportunistically eat other animals, as well as their mates.
But according to the Wildlife of Star Wars Field Guide,
Yeah, he's nerdy enough to own that.
they're mostly herbivorous.
So you're probably wondering why one attacked and bit Din Djarin if they're not active predators. Well, if active predation was the only reason animals attacked, we wouldn't see so many bison-related injuries in our national parks.
Both in canon and legends, blurrg are highly territorial and will attack if startled or if they feel threatened. That's probably what happened to Mando here.
An additional note can be made about their tails, which droop significantly, unlike the tails of most theropods.
However, some tail drooping is thought to be relatively common in ceratopsians like Triceratops, as well as in some thyreophorans like Ankylosaurus. Not the tail dragging we see in our outdated toys, but definitely drooping.
I mean, this is all fine. We've established they're likely not theropod dinosaurs, but we still don't know what they are. If only we could see the bones!
Well, you're in luck. There was a reason I brought up Battle for Endor. That weird little Ewok TV movie is the first, last, and only place where we have ever seen a Blurrg skull. Given that they kept the rest of their anatomy pretty much the same for the last 40 years, and given that we don't have any other examples, I'm going to assume that these skulls are still accurate.
But that doesn't even remotely look like a dinosaur skull.
Well, none that exist. It sure doesn't look like a theropod skull. But then again, neither do some theropod skulls like Majungasaurus or Spinosaurus. However, several groups of dinosaurs were known for fusing their skulls in really weird ways, most notably hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, ankylosaurs, and pachycephalosaurs. Note that it actually does have some key holes in its skull that could come from basal dinosaurs.
Hey, you're right. In particular, we see a few holes that could easily be displaced from where they sit on a basal dinosaur skull, like the orbit, the anorbital fenestra, and the inferior temporal fenestra.
It also has a sagittal crest, and what appears to be, albeit from far away, a shelf of bone extending back over the occipital region of the skull.
But with a cranium that big, it must have a massive brain case.
Not according to the Wildlife of Star Wars Field Guide, which shows that they have a pretty small brain, and most of that big cranium is solid bone that they use as a sort of battering ram.
You thinking what I'm thinking?
I definitely am, but we should do a quick trait analysis just to be sure.
Let's line them up. Time to review and compare.
As a dinosaur, a Blurrg would have been pretty weird. We know it's at least not a typical theropod, but there are still some weird ones. Here's some major dinosaur groups that possess some traits we've listed.
First, we established that Blurrg have 3 big rounded toes, which marks them as safe for most ornithischian dinosaurs, and just a couple of theropods. There aren't really sauropods with this foot structure, so it's not looking good for them so far.
We also noted that their metatarsals are extremely short, almost plantigrade. This makes them very different from typical theropods and ornithopods, but there are some exceptions among theropods in that regard.
After looking at their teeth and relying on behavioral observations from our field ethologists in a galaxy far, far away, we found that Blurrg primarily eat plants, but make some exceptions. Again, this fits with some theropod groups, but not the big iconic carnivores, obviously.
The peg-like teeth are most similar to sauropods, but similar arrays can be seen in some ornithischians.
And the lack of a beak further displaces them from some of our other more herbivorous and omnivorous dinosaurs on all ends of the spectrum. Blurrg have teeth all the way to the front of their mouths, not just at the side.
A droopy tail isn't probably a good phylogenetic indicator, but we don't have a whole lot to go off, so we'll include it anyway. It certainly knocks out ornithopods and most theropods.
The skull is going to be what seals the deal, I think. It's heavily fused all across in weird ways, with some fenestrae either fully fused or in weird positions. This is actually relatively common in dinosaurs, but definitely knocks out most theropods.
It also has a distinct shelf of bone extending back over the occipital region of the skull, which says quite a lot because only marginocephalian dinosaurs like ceratopsids and pachycephalosaurs have that.
Additionally, the skull is extremely thick and specialized for ramming behaviors.
Which means we finally think we've narrowed it down.
Blurrg seem to form a sister group to the Pachycephalosauria, but probably don't fall within Pachycephalosauria for several key reasons.
First and most obvious is that their skull is quite different from Pachycephalosaur skulls, with a pretty short face and a wide cranium.
They also still possess several key fenestrae which are totally fused in Pachycephalosaurs, and they don't have the keratinous beaks that you see on Pachycephalosaurs.
Part of the definition for the group Pachycephalosauria is also the bony bumps and spikes around the skull, which Blurrg notably lack. And while Pachycephalosaurs do have pretty short metatarsals for a bipedal dinosaur, they're not quite as short as in our friends the Blurrg.
So there you have it. Blurrg are close cousins of the Pachycephalosaurs, which have lost their keratin beaks, shortened their metatarsals, convergently evolved a ramming head, lost a few fingers, and developed a high fat content.
What do you think? Do you agree? Let us know in the comments why or why not. I'm sure you'll keep it civil because that's what Star Wars and dinosaur fans are best known for.
In spite of our professional paleontological opinions that Blurrg are close cousins of Pachycephalosaurs, in all truth, they probably were inspired by T-Rex when they were originally designed for The Empire Strikes Back by legendary special effects artist and paleontology enthusiast Phil Tippett.
Tippett originally referred to them as groupers and tadpoles from hell. They were unfortunately never used in Empire, and years later the design was dug back up for the Ewok movie.
It's not well known, but a lot of Tippett's designs were based on prehistoric animals. Tune back in each May 4th. I think we're gonna have to make an annual tradition of this.
Hopefully one day we can interview Phil himself for one of our videos to hear more from the mind behind the magic.
While you wait for next May 4th, feel free to drop some suggestions in the comments for a snappy, punny paleo Star Wars title we should give this new annual bit. We'd love some audience input.
And as always, stay fossiliferous.
And may the 4th be with you.
We love you. Thanks for watching.
Special shout out to everybody who contributed financially to our social media and science communication endeavors.